Heart-led living part 2. If you were not here last week or you did not hear Sandy and I in our presentation, you can always go back to Facebook, our Facebook page, and the talk is on there. Oh, thank you. Thank you. And I want to tell you a little bit of a story. And can we have that first slide, please? To meditate means to go home to yourself. That's what you just did. To meditate means to go home to yourself. Then you know how to take care of the things that are happening. I forgot I can look this way. Oh my goodness. Then you know how to take care of the things that are happening inside you. And you know how to take care of the things that happen around you. So Sandy found this slide, and as I looked at this, I'm like, I want to talk to you about heart-led living and how things come up in our lives every single day for every single one of us, many times in the course of a day when we forget to live from our heart and our brain. Many of us get triggered and we go immediately to our brain. We go to this part, right? The fear and flight, that part of our brain. So I'm going to tell you about this friend of mine. I went to an FCC soccer game for the first time, and I took my grandson, and I know nothing about soccer or football or whatever we call it here in the U.S., right? So, but a friend of mine also went, and he took his 12-year-old daughter. Now, they were sitting in the opposite end of the field, and we were sitting. Has anybody been to an FCC game? Soccer, I know there's a couple of you. Well, let me tell you, there is a section called the Bailey section or something like that. This Bailey section is huge. It's at least 200 people, and they're what I would call the pep band, right? Only, I mean, they have no seats because they're not going to sit. They are standing and they are yelling cheers and drums and flags and everything the entire game. They come up for a breath. That's about it. The entire game. We are right next to them. I am like, this is so cool, right? But I've got Miles with me. He's 10 years old. And apparently they have this drink, unlimited drink for $9. You can go back and fill it up as many times as you want. So, of course, Grandma got him that drink, right? Well, of course, he's sucking it down. He's got to go to the bathroom, and he's got to go get a refill. Then he's got to go to the bathroom again. So we're at the end of our aisle. He has to go that way to get these trips, right? And there was a wonderful people in our row, and the older couple were at the end, you know, and you see them go, right, get up again for this little kid, right? And we had a great time. So at the end of the game, we meet our friend, and he's got his 12-year-old daughter with him, and he's like, so how were your seats? And I'm like, they were so cool. He said, were the people friendly around you? And I said, oh, yeah, they were wonderful, because Miles had to keep getting up for more pop or bathroom. And everybody was so happy. And the pep band was right next to us, right? He's like, and I see his face, and he's like, well, we didn't have that way. He said, apparently we were sitting in the wrong seats in our row, and this gentleman came over and started barking at us for being in the wrong seat. And he apologized. I'm sorry, sir. I thought these were our seats. We'll gladly move. And he's just giving them heck, right? And my friend said, I just want to punch his lights out. And the 12-year-old says, yeah, me too. I wanted to just give him a piece of our mind. And then he says, but I remembered, breathe. And I told my daughter, breathe as we're moving to our right, correct seats. Just breathe, breathe, breathe. I say this story because how many times in the course of your driving or the course of your day do you want to punch somebody's lights out? Be honest. There's a moment when you want to punch somebody, and then you go to, okay, so there's your brain, okay? Then you go to your heart, and then you join these two together, and you bring compassion and understanding, and know that punching somebody's lights out is going to do what? Be on the news tonight, right? So we share that with you because I felt like that was an example. You got to, pay attention to what's happening inside you. And that's what my friend said. He said, I have realized through talking to you that when I get like that, my blood pressure increases, everything about me is not good, my face is, instead of, and as soon as I said breathe to my daughter, we both went from, okay? So I know you can relate to that story in your own life, and that's why I wanted to start with that this morning.
And you can just replace the meditate with mindful. To be mindful is to go home to yourself. So in those moments when we want to lash out, when we're triggered into something, that being mindful about being with ourselves in that space, that it's okay, it's human, it's part of our humanness that happens. There's nothing bad about us that happens. We could be mindful in the moment and stop and put the pause in that, come home to who we really are here. And the heart-led living is sometimes it's hard to go from here to here. So it's easier to start down at your feet. Ground into the feet. Feel yourself present in the moment. Give yourself that stop pause by getting really, really present to everything going on. Then you can take care of what's in here, what's wanting to come out. We can live by our values. Think about these principles that we teach in unity and actually apply them with empathy and compassion.
It doesn't mean you're a rug that people walk all over. That does not mean what we're talking about here, right?
No, it's just we're being logical, right? I mean, you can even, how much logic do you have online when you want to react like that? So even if you do want to be logical, how much of that is online when you're triggered? Not much. Anytime I'm triggered, I remind myself, that's like the oyster, right? What is it? How does just a little piece of grit gets into an oyster, and out of that can come what? Just by a little piece of rub, right? So mindfulness and meditation can help us build a capacity for this. Can help us build a capacity to, in the moment when we need it, be able to put that pause in there. And it doesn't have to be the kind of meditation like we just did, where you're closing your eyes. It could be a mindfulness meditation. If you're one of those people where your brain is just so active and your body is just so active that it's hard to be really disciplined about a traditional meditation process, open yourself to some mindfulness practices, because they'll get us to the same place practiced over and over again.
Just like my friend, the mindfulness practice was breathe, breathe, breathe. You can shift it that quick. Let's go to that next slide. Yeah. If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. I love this from Dalai Lama. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. Sandy, that's a good one. We were talking about compassion and empathy, and I just feel like that was kind of what my friend did. And so how do you see this happening?
Yeah, a lot of people I hear talk about this have this thing about compassion, and there's this thing out there called compassion fatigue. They're like, I got to be really careful because I'm an empath and all this compassion stuff. I just have to be really careful about how I do it, because if I'm too open to it, then, I just get myself into the space, into this hole. And there is a difference between empathy and compassion. Empathy is usually a good first step towards compassion. We don't want to stay there. So I thought it would be good to note the difference.
You call that what? Compassion fatigue?
Compassion fatigue.
I like
yeah,
that.
like being
I like
fatigued
that.
by compassion, because real compassion does not fatigue. Empathy can. Empathy can if we stay stuck in it, but compassion doesn't. So I thought that to note that might be helpful for a lot of you who find you have this empathic part of you. So empathy is to feel with another. So I could feel with your friend in the situation, because I've been in those situations before where I'm like, I could feel with them. And then what do you feel when you do that? When you empathize with someone and you start to go down that road with them, doesn't your body kind of feel like you're in the situation that they were in eventually? Yes. And that's the empath thing that will drain us. What it really does in our brain is it depletes our dopamine, the feel-good chemical in our brain, to stay there. Literally, they've watched it on an MRI. It changes the way our brain works so that we are almost literally in that situation with them. And over time, if we keep putting out this empathy, we're going to get a decrease in motivation. We're going to not be able to take pleasure in some of the things that we used to, kind of get some depression, and just it'll lead us to exhaustion. So what we really need to
Anybody relate to that?
Is take that first step when we resonate with someone else and that feeling, to note that that is the way we connect. So I can connect and say, I feel you. I literally feel you. And then I can step back and notice where I am separate from them. And I can instead offer warmth, care, and concern. So compassion holds the element of wanting to alleviate suffering in someone else and in ourselves. So empathy will keep us stuck in that suffering mindset. When we jump to compassion and we step back just a little bit and we want to help the person, we want to help ourselves get through whatever it is, it actually increases our dopamine instead. And it also releases oxytocin, which you might have heard of. Oxytocin. Oxytocin is the love, like you get that from hugging and kissing, and that it releases that too. So it further connects you with the person, but not in a way that's going to drain you. It's in a positive way that actually will motivate you towards action. It will motivate you towards solving a problem from a logical, heartfelt place, instead of being in the hole, suffering with them, and then going home after the conversation just so drained that you just got to sit on the couch because you can't hardly deal with your own things because you've been with someone else.
I love how she brings science to this, because this has been ancient wisdom, and ancient wisdom didn't know all this science stuff about the brain and the dopamine and all of that. And I love how science and spirituality are blending together to support each other. I love how you share that, and I know you have a story of your own.
Yeah, if you want to
share
go to
about
the
this.
next slide, this is from Pema Chodron that says, compassion for others begins with kindness to ourselves.
Oh, read that again. Love it. Compassion for others begins with what? Kindness. To who? Ourselves.
And it is very true, I'm not saying it's wrong, that we can show compassion for others and then in return feel compassion for ourselves, that it can't work the other way. I'm just saying that can only work for so long. Because think about yourself in that situation where you're triggered and then later on you're like, oh, why did I do that? I've been practicing these principles, I've been meditating. Good grief, really.
Good grief, Charlie
So
Brown.
my question to you is, can you really live a life of compassion and be compassionate with others and the world and all the stuff going on in the world, and be compassionate to yourself inside of it when your inner critic is running your show? If your inner critic is judging, that is not kind to you. And so you can show, I'm not saying you can't show compassion towards others, but look at the wellspring waiting to be unleashed if you could allow that inner critic to step aside and you can come from your heart in it.
And this is something that you personally have a story about.
Yeah, so I had a situation in my life a little while ago, and my stepson, he basically overdosed on alcohol. Some people don't know that can happen, but he was...
He's in his 30s, is that right?
Yeah, and he went without oxygen for quite a while. He was in a coma for 9 days, and a lot of his brain died in the time that he wasn't receiving oxygen. And for a while, after all this was kind of gone through, he lost a lot of his mobility, and the brain damage caused a lot of anger, and he was already an individual with anger issues. And it was uncontrollable now because a lot of his brain was not online anymore there. It had died. He was staying with my husband and I in my house, and my grandson, who
you have custody of.
Yes,
right?
I have custody from it's not his child, it's my stepdaughter's son living with us. And during this time, I felt unsafe. I felt unsafe with him in the house. I know Devin, my grandson, felt unsafe with him in the house. I couldn't be downstairs in Devin's space a whole lot because I was triggered. Because not only was he a large, very physical, violent person with a very loud voice, he was also very emotionally abusive to his girlfriends and would call them all through the day, hundreds of times. He was on the phone all day, and I heard these words, and I was completely triggered by it. And so I spent a lot of that time upstairs in my office, not down with Devin. I learned a lot during that time. I really allowed myself to be in this anger space and in this not knowing space and learn a lot. And I grew a whole lot spiritually. And in the aftermath of that, there's this part of me that feels and felt and does still this grief and guilt about not being with Devin. Because he was going through that too, and I wasn't down there with him. And that just broke my heart to know, and even the relationship that suffered between him and I because of that. And all the growth and like, oh my gosh, I've messed him up forever. Mm-hmm. I mean, can't say that you haven't had those if you're a parent at some point about your children. And then I went through this practice. And what the steps of this practice taught me of compassion is by stepping back, taking the mindful pause, being with that part of me that was suffering and the guilt, being compassionate to hear its story, and being non-judgmental of it. Just allowing its story in compassion. It arose to me out of the blue. It occurred to me a question. It didn't really come from me. It said, do you know what would have happened had you not stayed up there in your office all that time? And I knew right away, I would have left. I mean, I wanted to run. I wanted to run every day, multiple times during the day. I wanted to leave the house. There was something in me, that fight or flight, that just wanted to go. And even if I was not physically in the space, it was so much better that I was in the house and didn't leave Devin by himself. And I didn't leave my husband by himself, who was also struggling through this. I was able to stay because of the time that I spent away. Was it what I wanted to happen? No, but it's better than the alternative. And so practicing these steps, if you want to go ahead and show the next slide. You carry so much love in your heart. Don't forget to give some to yourself.
Take a picture of that one. Yes. And I think it's important that you catch on to what Sandy was saying, that there's, what did we have come with 3 or 4 steps? I have written 4.
I have 4. Yeah. First, it's that mindful pause and stepping back to see ourselves in the situation, from a pause place, from a compassionate place. Awareness of what we're thinking and feeling, and being able to be with that in a safe space, non-judgmentally, being non-judgmental about it. And then offering a type of compassion that we might for a friend. That was almost like a friend's voice that popped up to me.
If you're a note taker I'm going to do real short here. So first is take a pause. Second, this is just summarizing. Calm the critic, where she was judging herself, right? Criticizing herself. 3 is allowing to be and feel the emotion. Don't judge it. Just allow yourself to be and feel that emotion. And then 4 is talk to yourself like your best friend would talk to you. Talk to yourself like your best friend, not your parent or your 3rd grade teacher. Your best friend would talk to you. It's key how you did this, Sandy.
Yes.
Huge, huge.
Do you want to go to the next slide, please? So we're back to our intention to have balance between our heart and our mind. That Jesus did this. Jesus turned towards the suffering, right? Like practical Christianity is practicing this and being able to keep our heart and our mind connected. And sometimes we get stuck here and we can't ever get to here. And if this works for you, that's great. And if it doesn't, we're saying try it from the ground up. Pause, get grounded in your feet, get grounded in your body, and get into your heart space. And then allow it intentionally to connect with your mind.
I'm going to ask you, how important is what we're saying today? How important is it to you?
Very important.
It's critical, isn't it, to have a peaceful and healthy life? Because we are being called to action. That's what unity is about. Unity is not about leaving other religions and being in this religion, because we have no dogma. Remember, this is practical Christianity that unity talks about, of a way of life. And we are calling ourselves to action, to make a change within ourselves, and then the change happens out there. It's critical that we get this. These are principle 1 and principle 2 of Unity's 5 principles. Those are not dogma, they're principles that we suggest. And that is the God is and I am. That is the God is in us, in everything, right? God is in everyone. And you got to get honest with yourself, because I have a hard time seeing God in some people. Don't you? I'm sure my friend at that moment didn't see God in that guy who was blasting curse words at him and his 12-year-old daughter. So this is work, and it's tough. It's not easy.
We turn towards the suffering others because the suffering is what makes them act like that. It's where when we react, that's where we act from, right? When we lash out, when we react, what are we acting out of? We're acting out of our own suffering.
Our own suffering.
And instead, we can say, what about our humanity? That I'm just like that. I sometimes, too, react out of my humanity. And in that, we are one. That is the principle. We are one. So I can offer this individual in this time some compassion, because if I were in that person's space, I would want the same.
So I think we ought to end with running through those 4 things again.
Okay.
Because I think we're getting close to time, and I want to be sure. And that's Sandy. I'm going to say it again. The take a pause. And Sandy's story so supports this, but so does the story about my friend at the soccer game. That's how you've got some people, you have big stories, little stories, but it doesn't matter the size of the story. The feeling is the same at that moment, and that's soccer, in the soccer row, as Sandy living in this for months.
And then taming that inner critic. And knowing to tame it doesn't mean to get rid of it. It's there because it has something good for you, because sometimes it's safer to feel the judgment than it is to feel the feeling.
Isn't that true?
So tame it through compassion, not by trying to push it away. Let it know that you're trying to do good things, and it can take aside for right now that it's not needed.
And allow yourself to be and feel with that emotion. However long that takes. For my friend, it only took a few minutes, but the trigger happened but then he calmed it down. In Sandy's situation, she needed a long time to be in there and allow her critic to have its voice and to calm it down. So I'd see that this is important. And then step 4 is talk to yourself like you are your best, like your best friend would talk to you.
Offer yourself the compassion that you need. Don't wait to hear it from someone else. Offer it to yourself.
Let's look at that last slide. I think we have one more. Use your voice for kindness, your ears for compassion, your hands for charity, your mind for truth, and your heart for love. Somebody shared with me this week that through our trials, through our moments of being triggered or aggravation or this is not right, we gain wisdom. And think about that. You have the opportunity to gain wisdom every time that you go through. And look at the wisdom that she gained. Look at the wisdom that my friend gained in that, and what that taught his daughter, right? So this is so important for you parents, grandparents, any of you that have young children in your lives. It's so important for us to work this stuff because we show by our example. Yeah. Sandy, I don't know. I'd like to close it out on that slide.
All right.
Really, use your voice for kindness. Let's do the weekly affirmation. I am love in expression. I act in integrity with the truth I know and show compassion through understanding and empathy. Let's say it one more time. I am love in expression. I act in integrity with the truth I know, and I show compassion through understanding and empathy. You got that side over there? Namaste. That the Christ presence in me and Sandy totally see and honor that Christ presence in each and every single one of you. Namaste. Sandy, namaste. Thank you. Oh.